right, so it's been together and running for a little bit, and now it's shakedown runs and just playing whack-a-mole, finding things that I might have missed or things that can't handle what's going on and things that aren't working with the LS swap as I'm going. A common concern on doing LS swaps on these cars is the control arm interfering with the water pump, and you can see the factory water pump heater outlets come out right on the rear mount of the passenger side upper control arm. So what I did for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to move the water pump outlet from the top. It's usually over here on a truck water pump. So I got an F-body water pump. It's like a 2002 or 2003, something like that. You can look it up online. F-body water pump that puts the outlet up there. That way it gets a little closer to the inlet of the radiator, and it makes life easier for plumbing and it gets it out of the way. But that gets us back to the heater core. So, the fittings come out of the water pump easy enough. You just put the water pump in a vice grip and in a vise, and you can use vice grips to grab those fittings, and they'll twist right out. They're really only pressed into the aluminum. They're normally, tin outlets. Where do we got one? Similar to what's coming out for the upper radiator hose. It's just tin pressed into the aluminum. So you give it a good twist back and forth, it'll come right out. And then you tap it and drill it for 3/8 and 1/2-inch NPT plugs, and you're good. You got rid of the fittings. Well, I still had to flatten out the outside washer on the upper control arm. Come here, you little bugger. See if you can make it out. So the outside washer right under the bolt head, I kind of D'd it to clear because that was actually rubbing right on the outside of that old heater hose fitting. And I could have ground these bosses down a little more, but I didn't think I had to. And now that the pipe plugs are in there, I really don't want to be, I take the water pump back out or pull the control arm off. It's a pain in the ass. So I nipped the corner off that washer, and it was good. Down the road, no problem. I had clearance. As I rode, I had a couple miles on this thing, and the motor mount settled in, and everything shifts around. And probably what happened was when I originally clearanced this upper control arm, so that the metal on the inside of the control arm where the bushing mounts cleared those bosses, I think I did it with the front end up in the air on jack stands. So, of course, once you settle the suspension down and that control arm rotates towards the motor, it was hitting the boss on the front mount. We'll see if you can see. You can actually see the marks on it where it was banging into it. Not the little string of Teflon tape sticking out, but right below it is an impact mark. So it was sitting at ride height. It was almost sitting on it, and every little bump it would bump into it. And I was feeling that through the chassis, obviously. And so I got out there and poking around and looking, and sure enough, it's riding right on it. So basically, I had to pull the AC compressor off and move this heater hose out of the way. It actually normally runs underneath the compressor. And then got in there with a mini Sawzall and clearance the top of that control arm. You can see what that control arm normally looks like. It comes to a bit of a taper at the end. It's a big, long taper, well past the end of the bushing, and this side's trimmed way up to clear. There's a good shot of it there. So the water pump job really is it made a lot of sense. If they got rid of the heater fittings over there, I still want to run a heater, so I just drilled and tapped NPT elbows into each side, the inlet and the outlet side, to correspond with where those heater hose fittings were plumbed into the internals of the pump. And once you get the pump in your hands, it's easy to figure it out. Okay, it's actually split. There's a divider that runs up the middle of this water pump, right up the center, and it separates the thermostat from the engine side of the water pump. So it's easy enough to tap in. Especially once you get this water pump in your hand, you look in where the thermostat goes, you'll see the divider in there. As a matter of fact, these thermostats have that extra seal on the back end. And where's my old one? I just had it a minute ago. I thought it was right here. There it is. So this rear seal actually plugs a little hole that bleeds between the back half and the front half of the water pump. So as the thermostat opens, it actually moves this washer too and allows water to bleed past. So it's not only the outlet going out to the radiator, but it also opens this up and allows water to pass. As this little disc moves out of the hole, it exposes the hole and allows water to circulate through. So if you look at the water pump with the 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 thermostat housing off, you can look right into it and you'll see what I mean. So it's easy enough to figure out where to connect those heater hose lines. So I plumbed one on the bottom, was just easier fitment wise, and it sits right down here below the control arm. Doesn't rub. And then the lower, or the smaller of the two lines, the feed line actually comes off and fits down below the compressor, and it gets tucked out of the way pretty nice. And then, of course, I had to tap the back for the steam line coming off the LS, so there's an elbow tapped in there. I'm going to change that over. I want to go to AN lines. It looks cleaner, and I'm going to replace these front steam lines. I've got one on the driver's side that's seeping a little bit, and I'm not going to take it off and change gas and put it back on again. You know, it's an original steam line, so I'm going to make AN lines that are cheap enough to set up the little adapters and a floor AN. And then I'm going to set up a T, and I'm going to put a steam bleed fitting on the line, so it's easier to burp out the air that hangs up on the top of the cylinder heads. If I have to drain the cooling system, which I've been through once or twice already. I changed the thermostat down to a 180 from 187. And some other stuff going on. I've had to burp the air out of the cooling system a couple times, and it's a pain in the butt trying to get the air out of the top end and out of that steam line. You know, you got to loosen the clamp and slide the line back, and you know, you're leery about that line popping off under 15, 20 psi and blowing hot steam around. So it'd be nice if it had a steam fitting on it. I picked up some, if I got them handy here. And Dorman sells them in like a 2-pack. It's like $7 or $8. You can get them off of Amazon. What do I do with the little buggers? Where are you? Did I lose them? No, I didn't lose them. They're around somewhere. They're in my box of miscellaneous vet parts. No. Nope. Oh well, they're around somewhere. So that's it. So we'll hang the compressor back in there now. I need to make up lines for the compressor, and I need to get the compressor permanently rotated. I had the lines originally rotated up in this configuration, and I'm concerned they're going to hit the bottom of the hood, so I'm going to spin them around so that the lines point straight down. I've got plenty of clearance below the compressor now that everything is mounted and configured. I'm not worried about exhaust manifold clearance. That's no problem. And that's all she wrote. Thanks for tuning in. All right, well, that's not going to work. And now I remember why months ago when I set this up, I went with it the way I did. The problem is that this inside bracket sits out here on the compressor. It sits on the outside of these flanges that are built into the compressor. So you have to loosen this bracket a little bit to spread it enough to get the compressor out of the middle. The problem is if I rotated this compressor, so this bracket was like here, there's no way I'd get lines on that. It's not going to work. So the alternative would be to try and space the bracket off the head and move it back on this side of the compressor. The problem I have there is I've got to move it 7/8 of an inch, and I don't have clearance to get that bottom bolt in if there's a 7/8 of an inch spacer in there. And then I'm going to have to custom grind spacers for all the center supports that space the two bracket halves apart. As this guy sits in here like this. Where are you? So there's a couple of spaces go across it. I can grind those spacers down, but it still gets me the problem where if I space this bracket off the head to 7/8 of an inch, I'm right on the back of the water pump. And just for the convenience of being able to rotate the compressor down, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So I can get low profile elbows for the top of the compressor and point them straight back the same way the pressure tab fittings are. It'll go straight 90s, that way to keep them low. I was concerned about getting a thread on 90-degree fitting that's going to come up and it's going to arc over and then be up about here, and it might run into the bottom of the hood. But if I got a low profile elbow, I can point it straight out the back right into here. So there's different ways to skin that cat. So I don't think I'm going to bother spacing the bracket off. I'm going to put the compressor back in and call it a day. And then when I start working on the lines, I'll make whatever accommodations I need to. Because the compressor fits just fine the way it was. I just thought it would be cleaner having the lines facing down and without the drain plug in the middle of the compressor body. Not that I'm ever going to drain it, so it's not, that doesn't matter to me. But all right, well, I'll check in a little bit, I guess. All right, let's see if we can get a shot of this going in without the camera falling over and driving me crazy. These are the cheapo like eBay, Amazon kits, and they work fine, but they're a bit of an erector set. I remember the first time I set it up, it took a while figuring out what spacers to go where. But let's get this thing let's get this thing back installed here. And a little bit of blue Loctite. On this one way down the bottom, this is a countersunk one that goes way down the bottom, the one that backs up to the water pump. And if I had a 7/8 longer bolt, there's no way it would fit. I mean, I could grind down a channel in the water pump, but I don't know how thick that wall is. I don't want to break through. And if I grind the head away, make the head smaller, then I'm going to lose holding force on the bracket. Let's get this guy in there. I wish I could get a better camera angle so you can see exactly what I'm doing, but you'll have to use your imagination. I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to run this countersunk bolt up till it's snug, and then I'm going to start some of the spacer bolts that go higher up in the bracket, like here and here, just to keep the bolt holes lined up so when I tighten the countersunk bolt down, it doesn't shift around. Let's see, yeah. So at least now it's located so it can't move around when I tighten that countersunk bolt down, and the holes will still line up. Because I'm going to need to put some other stuff in before I can run those big long bolts through. Actually, that top bolt with the spacer can go in now, now that I think of it. I'm going to pull these guys back out and put that top spacer in. I can't make it tight though. I need to leave this loose so I can sneak the compressor ears in between these two. If they're tight together, it can't. I don't have enough room to get it around. So I got to be able to get the ears in there. I'll be tightening down that lower countersunk one, because that's a bear to reach once everything's in there. I heard a click. Did you hear a click? I heard a click. Definitely the proper torque spec. This was that top spacer I was talking about, goes in between the two plates. Man, I'm not making it snug yet. Again, I got to be able to tweak this bracket out of the way. Let me back off those two on the water pump. Here's where we are so far. You've got two bolt right onto the water pump with spacers. Spacers everywhere. Spacer madness. See if I can get lucky and set the camera back up where it was without falling over. tensioner sneaks back in through here. The tensioner uses 2 different length bolts because one just goes into the plate here, and the one goes all the way through into the cylinder head. So you got 2 different length bolts. Since the plate's right on the cylinder head, they're not much of a difference in length, but they are. The plates themselves are still the same distance apart, so the spacers are the same. The longer of the 2 bolts is going to go through into the heads. That's the bottom one. And that's threading into the head, good. Now my heater hose I'll tuck down below so it actually goes between the spacers. And we'll just get them. I don't want to limit the amount of movement I get up here. And you got to make sure you tighten down. That top one there actually butts into the pulley. You can crank it around with a wrench and try and get it out of the way, but it's just as easy. Before I tighten everything up, I'll tighten that one down first to draw it in and get it away from the pulley, and then I can tighten these down. You know, I'm going to put that guy in just about last. Make sure I have enough room to flare that bracket around. See, now this is the problem. The front of the compressor has this cast iron boss on it with the bolt head that bumps out, and the bracket has to hook down in between it, in between the 2 bolts. So to get it over this hump, I can't flare the bracket because it's one piece of billet aluminum. I've got to push the bracket out to clearance it around. It takes a little doing, but it'll go. Go. And we're down. Looks like all the bolts are starting to line up. Let's make sure we keep everything lined up while we're doing this. Always one of those mechanics moments. How many different angles can we make our wrist bend? This is something I generally recommend that I've just found out over the years, that whenever you have something with multiple points of attachment and they're hard, there's very little room to wiggle in the bolt holes. It's a very snug fit. You want to try and get everything started, all the bolts threaded in, started as much as possible. That way as you're torquing down on one bolt, it's not pivoting your items and moving the attachment point so the other bolts don't line up anymore. So try to get as many things started to keep the bolt holes lined up. And once I crank this bracket down up here, it will draw it in, and this will be fine. I don't want it hanging on a half a thread and putting too much torque on it and pulling the thread off. So I'm going to draw that in a little bit. And the last one down front. It's funny, I just saw a meme on Facebook or Instagram that I shared, and it was a girl asking a guy, "How can you do that with your? Where'd you learn to do that with your fingers?" And then the next clip was a video of a mechanic reaching his hand around an engine upside down and backwards and threading a nut on a stud. I'm like, yeah, pretty much. Alright, I'm back. Well, let's get these guys torqued down now. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Too busy talking and not thinking. I'm going to run this one down first. That way I'm not burying the end of the tensioner pulley into the bolt head and bending it. Wait a minute. Click. Alright, good. Those are 14s on the water pump. I don't know why they could have. They're almost all the same thread pitch. I don't know why they couldn't make all the same head size. I don't know. It's hard to get, good engineering and quality control from 8-year-old Chinese kids. What can I tell you? These nuts are flange head, and they're serrated flanges, which means they've got little grippy grooves that grab the plate it's torquing against. So when all possible, I try and turn the bolt, which does not have a serrated flange head underneath it. Let that flange grip in real good, instead of spinning the flange head with the serrations, because you'll just grind away the aluminum, and ultimately it won't grip. Get it snug. The nice thing about these is they do grip pretty good. So even if you can't get to the nut, if you can stop that nut from spinning, and the serrated flange grabs the aluminum, you get it snug. It'll self hold. I just dragged the edge of my finger on the nut as it was turning to slow it, so it would pull it up to the aluminum. Once it grabbed the aluminum, it's good. Alright. So those are the compressors. I got one more on the bottom. And I'll do the same thing here. I don't even need to put a wrench on the nut, because once the serrations grab the aluminum. You know what I mean? Alright, now let's see. I know those are tight. Let's check our two tensioner bolts are tight. The only thing left is going to be the idler pulley and put the belt back on. See if that's on the bolt hole yet. Oh, almost. And I'm intentionally not using hammer because I don't want to mar the aluminum up too much. I'm just using the plastic handle because it won't damage the aluminum spacer. And then this one is a 16, which is probably really a 5/8, but who knows? There we go. I think our tensioner is a 13, no, it's a 14. Yeah. Okay. Get the belt staged as best you can. I find it's easier to slip it over the water pump or over the tensioner pulley. Well, the tensioner pulley is smooth also. The problem is you're going to have a wrench on the tensioner pulley, so it's capped. You can't slide the bolt off the tensioner pulley. So what I'm going to do is pull it back off the water pump a little bit. My torque wrench, my wrench for moving the tensioner stage there. And get this belt rather, lined up. These could be a juggling act, you know. You get one pulley lined up and it jumps off another pulley, and you start torquing the belt sideways and it pops it off the power steering, and next thing you know, you're cursing and throwing stuff. Ask me how I know. These things happen. Alright, so now it's staged. It's on the alternator and the power steering pump. It's around the crank. It's around everything except the water pump, and that's a nice big round flat pulley. Easy to slide the belt off. And all I should have to do is crank the tensioner over to slack the belt, and I should be able to feed it right around the water pump. Like so. Here we go. We're on the power steering pump. We're on the other idler. We're still on the alternator. We're centered on the crank pulley. Where'd my flashlight go? Dagnabbit. Here we go. And this is the way it's set up on this compressor. I had it in the center. This is an 8-groove pulley. These compressors come with an 8-groove, but it's a 6-groove belt standard on this motor. The rest of the accessories are only 6-groove, so it's easier to run it down the center of the pulley. And we're pretty much it. I'm leaving the compressor unhooked for the time being. The last thing I want is to be running this compressor to get accidentally activated with no Freon in there and the ends plugged, and so I'm leaving the compressor clutch unplugged for the time being. Once I get the line set done and I charge it, obviously I'll connect it so it can activate, but this way the pulley just freewheels. It never drives the compressor guts inside. I don't worry about overpressuring or burning everything up with no lube and no too much head pressure, because it'll try and draw on the suction side and release out the discharge side, but nothing's moving. Obviously they're capped, so it'll just fight against itself until it's nuked. So that's about it for today. Thanks for tuning in.